Greetings, adventurers, travelers, and fellow keepers of the lake. How are you all doing? Welcome back. It's been a couple of days since I made a video, and that's because I was in beautiful and warm Saharan desert, and now I'm back in rainy and cold, miserable Serbia. But anyways, we're gonna keep it casual for today. I want to talk to you about a very interesting topic, and that's having two DMs. Goblin Games, another excellent dungeon tuber channel, has called upon us, let one of your players taste the power. If you've got a player who's curious about DMing, co-DMing is a cool icebreaker in my opinion. So I've done this with one of the players from our main game, and it lets them dip their toes into the role, feel the thrill of shaping the world, but without the full weight of the campaign on their shoulders. Even like running a one-shot can be a bit burdensome if you have to remember all the details and like remember the system and the rules and everything. But I think this idea isn't just something that you can use to help new GMs. Maybe you and a friend both have sessions planned for this week, and instead of fighting over whose campaign gets the spotlight, you think, why not run it together? Anyways, we tried both approaches, we had a blast on our side of the screen, and the players said it felt like having a special guest. Some might be wondering, why would anyone willingly share the DM seat? Isn't that like inviting someone to move in and then they redecorate your apartment while you're still living there? Well, no, that's called marriage. I hope my wife doesn't watch these, she's gonna kill me. But as with marriage, that's also what makes co-DMing so powerful. Bringing a second GM, it changes the table dynamics a bit, and done right, it can lead to some of the most memorable sessions you'll ever run and play at the same time. So yeah, here's how I like to do it. Start with a couple of NPCs for them to play. Let them add their own quirks and personalities, but keep the stakes low. And they're free to back out if they feel overwhelmed and you'll just take the role. But in my personal experience, they might surprise you with how quickly they jump in. I mean, they've been players for so long, they know how to roleplay a character, and now they just have to roleplay like one or two NPCs, and they have some downtime in between, like they have when playing their character. And yeah, I think one thing that helps is to give your co-DM a function, like a limited jurisdiction where they know what their goal is. In terms of having a less important NPC, like give them that NPC's motivations. Sometimes they might feel like they want to build on top of that, and just assure them that that's totally cool. So yeah, you might be surprised that this NPC becomes one of the party's favorite, for example. And then as they get more comfortable, maybe in that game, maybe in another game, I'll let them manage side NPCs and even control factions. So it's their sandbox in a way, and that sandbox is within a bigger game. And it's wild to see what they'll come up with. Let's say you're playing a session where players are being in between the mob and the police, for example, and the co-DM can pick one of the factions and control everything that has to do with that faction. So players enter a bar and they ask if someone is there, you say no as the main GM, but then the co-GM might jump in and say, there is a policeman taking notes and interrogating the barkeep. Now they introduced some other NPC here. They're controlling the whole faction, so they decide if someone from that faction is in this scene. Let's talk boundaries. Sometimes it helps to know where the narrative jurisdiction of one DM ends and another begins, especially for that faction controlling example. If you've given away that power, you do not want to take it back. It makes the co-DM feel incompetent. Same goes with NPCs. If you're going more for that theater-like vibe, you might assign major NPC roles to one GM and other major NPC roles to the other, and have some even like short conversations between two, but never take control of their NPC without their consent. Even asking for that consent can send a wrong message, so be sure that they're like asking you to help them out. And then when they are really in the groove, this is the point where you can give them some really important decisions to make. In our game, in our example, there is this worm that lives inside the player's body. Yes, I know, horrible stuff. And this worm gives you the ability to control time. And changing who this worm is latched onto really changes the dynamic of the whole game. So I gave this power, this decision to my co-DM, and they loved it. And the players loved it as well. And this is the kind of power that gets a co-DM hooked. If you want to know more about the worm and how it came into contact with the players, check out the previous heist video for more information on that. Also, I gave our co-GM the green light to decide when this worm jumps from one player to the other. So I would even be surprised if this happens in like a tense situation or like an action scene, or maybe just players are going to bed and the worm just pooch from one to the other. There's a few tips I want you to keep in mind. First, make sure your co-DM has an okay grasp of the world. Players from within the campaign or the setting might mold it to their character's advantage if they're coming back to that campaign, which is natural, and yeah, it's a bit of an experimental thought to begin with, but it can be balanced out with some clear guidelines. And the other one is, don't expect your co-DM to know all the rules. They don't have to, that's why you're there, they're new to this role, and let them feel the rush of DMing without needing to like memorize things. If they get overwhelmed or decide to stay silent, that is completely okay. They're observing what you're doing, they're learning, it's all part of the process. And if they feel like the situation is right, they might jump in again. If they're silent for too long and don't seem to be having fun, one reason could be that they're feeling like there is not enough space for them, or they don't want to ruin the fun, as they're probably thinking like, you can do it better than them. I think if you notice something like this, take a 5-minute break, talk to them so you can align your expectations, encourage them, maybe point out some of the highlights of their DMing. And if you figure out they have problems with improvising on the spot, then give them some things that you already have written down in your notebook. This works even better if you have a pre-written module that you can send in advance and then maybe print out 2 versions of it, hand one to them, maybe write some notes in it, and maybe they just don't want to continue co-DMing for that night, and that's also fine. Find a way to get them to the other side of the table again. So give them like an NPC that they tried running a pre-gen and let them join the party. That's also fine. There is no hard rules here. It's all about nurturing this hospitable environment for them to feel comfortable and to try it out. And one last tip, something that is very important, is to encourage your co-DM to stay neutral. So sometimes new GMs get wrapped in this us versus them mentality. A little co-DM can focus their fire onto one player, and that's just not fun. So make sure they know what DM role is. It's to challenge, not to compete. So in terms of communicating while you're co-DMing, some things you don't want players to know, and for this I usually use just regular notes. I write it on the piece of paper, show it to them, or I write it on the computer and like they see my screen, maybe send a message to them, take 5-minute break. If it's not like an action scene or something, go outside, prepare the next scene. I think this is a very interesting way to get your friends to try DMing, and after we tried it, a bunch of other players said, hey, can we try it for a one shot or two? The feeling in my veins of maybe becoming a player for only one session. Please, just one session. Let's just briefly mention what happens when your co-DM is experienced. The game, of course, gets an extra edge because they're not overseeing the whole campaign. They have the freedom to push the boundaries, and an experienced co-DM can add tension and drama that might feel risky for regular games. In this chaotic back and forth, one of the players might end up blind, and they might even like it happened in our game. I don't know if I would have the courage to do it in that particular moment, and I admit to this. Sometimes I can be soft, that's something I'm working on, but my fellow GM, he is not that soft, so I felt the need to show off a bit. And this happened after a very intense round of playing a card game with an entity from the void. That's why I love this hobby. That's like, wow, those things, those little things. Getting blind after a card game with the being from the void. What else can you ask for? So yeah, they'll introduce moral gray zones, weird secrets, and impossible challenges, and I think those will surprise me as much as they surprise the players. I mean, this is the thing with any art form. Deeper you are in your own story and in your own art, you might be missing out some logical interactions in the world, and the co-DM might see something narratively very satisfying that's right before your eyes. For example, I had a bunch of actions in our Code of Krampus game. I felt something is missing. I had some motivations set and they intersected a bit, but my friend, who was about to be the guest DM, took my lore dump and just modified it just a little bit, and the motivations intersected around the players so much more. So even just having a special guest, someone who is in this hobby for a long time, for just one session can shape the rest of the campaign. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say on this topic. It was a bit of rambly, a bit of script, a bit of like all over the place. A lot of things are cooking behind the scenes, and if you want to hear more about it, if you want to get some tips or talk to people on how to get into jamming, how to get people into co-jamming, check out our Discord. It's growing slowly but steadily. And of course, if you like what you see, consider subscribing. That helps me out a lot. So in this month of December, and even more so in the month of January, I hope to see you all behind the DM screen with someone new. And yeah, until then, I bid you
farewell, keepers.